Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming in and helping us celebrate 5 years of dissident publishing. Yeah, I'm just really excited to have all of us together and have all of us in the New York Public Library, which just feels like such an honor. Um, the New York Public Library has been a supporter of Street Noise from the very beginning. They've bought copies of all of our books in multiples. Um, I always go in and check to make sure in the catalog. As has the Brooklyn Public Library. They're my other favorite library system. Favorite. There we go. Um, and I can't believe that we have people zooming in. We have Melissa Chan, who is the author, one of the authors of, oh, there's Mohammed Sabane. Hi, Mohammed. um, so, first of all, we're going to talk to Melissa Chan, who is now in Berlin, and Badi Tsao, who is in Australia, who are the authors of You Must Take Part in Revolution. And if there is a dissident title, I think that could win the prize for the most dissident title. Um, so I think what we wanted to do is let them lead off the discussion because it's late for them, and then they can say goodbye. And Mohammed is there too, but he's going to hang out even though it's 1 a.m. in Ramallah in the West Bank. He's going to he's a night owl, so he's going to stay up and wait with us. Okay, so I guess the first thing I wanted to know, I wanted to just open it up, Melissa and Badi Tsao. I think I've heard you talk so much in your book tour about the timeliness of your book and how relevant it is to what's going on. And I found it really insightful to hear your perspective from having seen authoritarianism up close and personal in China all these years, and how that relates to what we're experiencing here in the US, and how your book, You Must Take Part in Revolution, can be a guidepost to us, to Americans, as we figure out how to fight for democracy. So it's over to you now.
Hi, Liz. First of all, I hope everyone can hear us. I don't know if the tech is awesome. And most importantly, I want to congratulate Street Noise Books for 5 years. That is an amazing achievement, and you've done so much with all the titles in such a short amount of time. That is courageous and exactly the kind of energy we need in the fight against authoritarianism in the United States and internationally. So big hats off to you, even though I'm keeping mine on because I am actually not in Berlin right now. I'm at The Hague in a hotel that's freezing. So I do want to explain the reason for the hat, and that is definitely not my art that would be on my wall, not my taste. So having
That was art either. No.
no, no. So having said those important things, from the congratulations to the denial of the questionable art, and I'll start with answering the question. Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about primarily having reported in China, but then also going to places such as Russia, as you know, Liz, I talk about this in our book talks, North Korea, Cuba, and then of course the United States, right? All gradations of people in charge who are pursuing power and want to oppress people in various ways. So I think there are similarities, even though people are really uncomfortable about making those comparisons because they are different. But I think there's a thorough line in people with autocratic tendencies and authoritarians that I think is universal. And I would say that at The Hague, I was just at the European Cartoon Awards and the Cartoons Day that they have there, which brought together Europeans, but also cartoonists from Turkey, Jordan, and that was the big takeaway. The other thing I would just say is that as a journalist, there's a tendency when we talk about these things, even in the United States, in political terms, like what we can do in the courts, how the next elections are so important for the midterms, and those are. But I think we have to think about soft power a bit more, which is in the artistic and creative space, which is the space that graphic novels, dissident publishing exists in. And I'll just end my thoughts and hand over to Badi Tao. This is completely apocryphal, I believe, but just apparently during World War II, there's a nice story. World War II, the British are drawing up their annual budget for the country, right? The government and how they're going to spend their money. And the finance minister goes to Churchill and says, well, here it is. And Churchill says, you've cut a lot, pretty much all of everything out of culture. And well, it's wartime. There's the Blitz. People are getting in line for bread. And Churchill looks up at the minister and says, then what the hell do you think we're fighting for? So I think the centrality of arts and creativity is something that I've certainly come to appreciate working for Badi Tao, but something that has been something I've become more aware of as a journalist over the years when I report on authoritarianism, and the critical part that culture plays in this cannot be forgotten.
Thanks, Melissa. Badi Tao, I'm sure you have lots of words of wisdom to share with us.
It's a great pleasure and honor to be able to come to this event. And I actually like to share a little experience that I have in America. We were in Miami for the book fair to talk about You Must Take Part in Revolution. And nowadays when I'm entering America, particularly in the airport, I feel nervous because not because my criticism against China, but also because our criticism against, the decline of democracy and Trumpism in America. So when I'm entering the airport and talking to the officer in the border control, I always think, well, maybe one day I will be, not allowed to come into America because of this criticism. And I have this rather interesting conversation with this office this time. So, as usual, they ask, why are you coming here? What's the purpose? I tell them coming for the Miami Book Fair and coming for this very graphic novel. You must take part in revolution. And then he asked me about the content of the book. I said, well, it's about a war, a world war actually, between a kind of dystopia dictatorship in China versus America in Taiwan. And then the officer said, oh, that's very interesting. Who win? But tell me who win in the end. I tell him, in our world, it's really getting bad, but the only winner can be the individual who want to make a difference in the world. I hope democracy will win. I mean, he allowed me in. I think if he asked one question further, I would have to tell him how much concern that I have for this country at this moment. Honestly, I think the damage has been done with the decline of democracy in America, not just to the citizens and the residents living in this country, but also globally. Recently, even the new Pope made this very unique and unusual commentate, saying that what Trump has done to the Ukraine deal is serving a damage to the ally between America and Europe. That is a big split in the damage to democracy globally, which means it really giving authoritarian regime like China or Russia a lot of advantage, which is pushing our world to a very dangerous situation. Thus, coming back to what we can do as artists and writers or publishers in this very particular moment, I do think to be able to speak freely, to be able to shaking those boundaries or shaking those cages are coming close to us in democracy in America at this moment is very, very important. And that is particularly why independent publishing like Street Noise and many other publishers and artists and the writers are needed a lot of help at this moment to be able to continue this courageous work as all we do.
Thank you. That is so interesting. I remember you really encouraging audiences in America to fight for freedom that you don't realize until it's gone. And I've always found your perspective to be really uh, very insightful. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Are we supposed to, I think, do you both want to stay around or are you going to have to leave us? What's the plan? Wait, you're muted, Melissa.
Oh, if you're going to Mohammed next, we'll stick around for the remote part of it and drop off once you turn to the in real life. Does that make sense? Maybe?
Yeah, we can do that. I think, yeah, that's fine. That way,
Yeah.
Mohammed can get to bed
Yes.
clear too. So we have Mohammed Sabane, who's here from Ramallah. Are you in Ramallah right now?
Yes, I'm in Ramallah. I waited in Ramallah to to contact you because in Jenin it's very hard.
Right, right. So your family is from Jenin, right? But
Yeah.
you work in Ramallah. Is that
I
right?
work in Ramallah and Jenin, the main campus of my university in Jenin, and originally I'm from Jenin, but unfortunately because of the Israeli, every day they break into our villages and the city. That's why I'm not sure that I can have a good internet connection there. First, I wanna congratulate you for this event, and it's a great chance to be here in this event, meet the audience in New York since we cannot get visa as a Palestinian.
Yeah, the last time I've had many pleasant, uh, wonderful times spent with Mohammed over the years in different places, but never in the U.S. But I remember you telling me last time we talked that you actually love the US, even though the US has been denying you a visa for years. And you love New York in particular. So that always makes me smile. We last saw each other at the Angoulême Comics Festival in France in the end of January. So Mohammed is the author of Power Born of Dreams, My Story is Palestine, which won the Palestine Book Award in 2022. He's also the artist who did behind the book that came out this year called Eyes on Gaza, which is by Khaled Beydoun. It was Mohammed's political cartoons that we used with the essays that Khaled wrote. And he's the forthcoming author of another book for Street Noise called Welcome to Hell. And that is coming out in the spring of next year. So he's been with us for a lot of our journey. I met Mohammed in Ramallah back in 2019. So he was in on the whole Street Noise plan from the beginning. And now I'd love to hear your perspective, Mohammed, as a political cartoonist working every day in the West. And oh, there it is. And your experience writing graphic novels and how you see the role of a cartoonist in this fight for political freedom and justice and human rights around the world.
Actually, first, yes, I love New York because I get to know the comics from New York actually by my friends Seth Bookman and Ethan. That was in 2015 when I came for second time to New York, and that gave me a chance to get to know the comics and meet many comics artists. And I think I have family in New York who they established the Freedom Theater in Jenin Camp, my city. Unfortunately, the Freedom Theater was destroyed last year by the Israeli and all the Jenin camp also. It's been surrounded by the Israeli for more than 6 months. Maybe the people, they do not know exactly what's going on here in the West Bank because unfortunately, with the genocide in Gaza, most of the news and outlet they do care about what's going on in Gaza more than the West Bank. But also we are facing silent genocide here. That's why I do believe also as a Palestinian cartoonist, comics artist, and all of this kind of uh, creative industry, that it should be used to convey the voices of the people here in Palestine. Actually, Edward Said, the Palestinian scholars, he say that nation themselves are a narration. That's why I do believe that as a Palestinian, we should convey our narration for the people from around the world and convey what's going on here in this area, particularly in the West Bank and in Gaza. In Palestine, we don't have comics actually. Before Born of a Dream, you have the privilege that you published the first Palestinian comics that came from Palestine. Yeah, Joe Sacco did many books about Palestine, Layla Abdel Razek, but all of these people who they have done something about Palestine, they were from outside Palestine, not from inside Palestine, not Palestinian. And I do agree with also Edward Said that as a Palestinian, we should convey our narrative by ourselves, not like Karl Marx said that they cannot represent themselves. No, we as a Palestinian, we can represent ourselves. We can talk about our issues. We can use all of this medium, political cartoon, visual art, comics, graphic novel, and all of this kind of medium to convey our narrative. I do believe that it is very important for us to do that and to, last year also I did many workshop for young artists to teach them how they can do comics here in Ramallah and in other cities. And now we are working more than one graphic novel for artists from Gaza, from West Bank, try to connect them with publisher from abroad, from France, from United States and other countries, because it's very important here in Palestine. We don't have a publisher for this kind of books and cultural industry. That's why it's very important. In another hand, we are not free to talk about Palestine. It's not easy. We don't have this kind of freedom of speech to convey all of our narrative. Last year, more than 260 journalists they were killed by the Israeli army in Gaza. In the West Bank, in my city, Shireen Abu Akleh, and it should be mentioned that she is an American citizen. She was killed by the Israeli army in my city in Jenin. It's not coincidence. This is the Israeli policy toward anyone who want to talk about our issues and about the Palestinian. Yes, we are dancing in this minefield, and we know that we are facing all of these atrocity and lack of freedom of speech. But this is our role, and it's what should we do as a political cartoonist and as a graphic novels or as a visual artist. You knew also that 2 years ago when I went to the Lakes District Festival in the UK, that they tried to also prevent me to participate in that festival just because I am a Palestinian, and they accused me by many accusations that I'm anti-Semitic and all of this kind of accusation. Recently, actually, I was one of my invitation to visit festival in France also was cancelled for the same reason. And they pretend that they don't have money to invite me. And unfortunately, they have been organizing this invitation and this event in France for more than 1 year. And then the last moment, they mentioned that they don't have budget to bring me from Palestine. At the same time, my publisher in France, her governmental fund was blocked because she accused that she is supporting the Palestinian people. We are facing all of this lack of freedom of speech, not just in Palestine and also around the world. The issue of my visa to visit United States, I've been in the United States for more than 10 times. I'm not shaping any danger to be invited to United States or another country, but just because they want to block the Palestinian voice. And that's also what we do believe, that this is our mission. Whatever we are faced, we will keep doing what we should do as an artist.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. Thank you to all three of you. It's just been such an honor to work with each one of you. I'm just really, really proud of the work that you've all done. And thank you for joining us tonight. And I'm going to let you all go get some sleep. And then we'll keep talking about dissident publishing back here in the New York Public Library on Fifth Avenue in New York. Good night. Wow. That's intense. Okay, so it's hard to follow that, isn't it? Well, I think I'd like to talk a little bit about street noise and how we got started, and the roles that you all played in our journey. And I want to start by talking about the word dissident, because it's a big word. I mean, it's not a big, it's a heavy word. It's a strong word. And it's not a word that street noise used in the beginning. It was something that sort of came about in the last year. Wonder why. And I realized that for anyone who doesn't know, I started street noise back in right after the first Trump election. That's when I got the idea to start street noise. And it grew out of my frustration with what I saw as this growing hatred around the country, and sort of that was being stoked by Donald Trump and his buddies, and the othering of people, and the hatred that came out of finding scapegoats for everything, and then anyone who's not like me must be horrible. And I tried to figure out how I could counter that. What could I do? Because that's the thing that really upset me, was watching this happening across the country, not just watching it in the White House, but how all of his followers, it was just spreading everywhere, this meanness and this hatred, and I felt that what I'm good at is making books, and that's something I could do. I'm not a politician, I'm not a writer, I'm a book publisher. And so I decided to start this publishing house that would specifically try to focus on people's actual real stories, people's reality, their truth, letting them speak for themselves so that we could get to know them, so that we couldn't other them anymore, because they become real. They have trials and tribulations just like everybody else. And that way it brings us together as a human race. So fast forward to the second Trump administration, and it's gotten even crazier. And I didn't really embrace the word dissident in the beginning. It wasn't something that occurred to me. And that suddenly it's something that has been seeming much more appropriate, because dissidence, I looked it up, not on AI. I don't own a copy of the Oxford English Dictionary, but I did look up the Oxford English Dictionary's definition of dissident. And it is someone who strongly disagrees with and actively opposes established policies, doctrines, or institutions, particularly governments in authoritarian states, often risking danger for their views. So I think that we sort of made this big turn in my head that now we were like outwardly going to fight against this administration. And a lot of that is because of the overt fighting against freedom of speech that we are now seeing. so much more than the first go around. The hatred against the trans community has been absolutely astonishing and horrifying. And the wiping out of history out of our documents, getting rid of things in museums, shutting down science, wiping out data that's been collected, just awful things that actually made me realize that what we're doing as small independent publishers, dissident publishers, is we are protecting those truths, and we are protecting the truths of our authors to make sure that their stories don't disappear. All of the Street Noise books are now in the Library of Congress, and until that starts getting burned down, which could happen, we have them. They exist. So anyway, that's my definition. That's why I think we're a dissident publisher. And I wanted to welcome these three wonderful authors here. We have Makee, who's the author of Call Me Emma, and Makee's book came out this spring. It's a memoir. There it is. Ta-da. And then we have Tracy White, who wrote an amazing book called Unaccompanied. The subtitle is Five Brave Teens. What is the subtitle? Yes, Stories of Brave Teenagers Seeking Asylum. And we have Bishakh Som, who wrote Spellbound, a graphic memoir. So I would like to ask each one of you some questions about, and you can just riff on the ideas of dissident publishing or activist or whatever you feel, whatever label you like to embrace. Talk about what it means to you and what your role is in the world, how you see your role in the world. Bishakh, do you want to start? Because, I wanted to start with Bishakh because she's been with me since the very beginning. Right?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you, Liz, for being part of my artistic and comics family and for putting my book out in the first place. It was a real honor to work with you and to get to know you and to be your friend. So thank you. I think I'll just speak on behalf of the trans community because that's my job. But I mean, all kidding aside, inhabiting a trans body is, I think, by default being a dissident. It's like a big middle finger to binary ways of thinking, of strictures, of narrow-mindedness. It's saying yes to possibilities and expansiveness and openness, all the things that are against authoritarianism, against fascism, right? Like it, but to be able to take it beyond just the fact of being, and then to have an opportunity, a vehicle to make art, to use this body to make art and to make books, to tell stories is just extra special and even bigger middle finger to autocrats and to people who want to run the world in a very specific and horrible way. So yeah, I don't think it's hyperbole to say that there's a war on trans bodies, just as there's a war on Palestinian bodies and a war in China, against people who would dare to speak up. So I think in my own humble way, my book is about becoming an artist, but it's also about becoming trans. And I think the fact of being able to tell that story is in its own way a small act of dissidence. So thank you for allowing me to tell that story, Liz.
Absolutely. It's a beautiful, beautiful story. I don't know. How are we doing on time? Are we? Okay, good. Perfect. Can we ask the same kind of question to Tracy. We're going to go to Tracy next because her book, we're doing this in order. Makee's book is the most recent. Tracy's book is not a memoir. It's some of our Street Noise books are not memoirs, but this one is still nonfiction. And you're telling other people's stories. Do you want to talk about why you feel your book is a dissident book?
Sure. And thank you and congratulations again, Liz. I know everyone's saying that, but it's really amazing. And I remember you came, I was at an event and you came up and you said, I'm going to be starting a publishing house. And I had this card from you and I saved it for a while because I think that was like in 2010, maybe 2012. It was a little bit before. And then I kind of pulled it out and I think that's how we sort of came to you.
Actually, I remember where it was. It was in the
New
New York Public Library.
Across the street. Yeah.
That's where we met.
Yeah.
I forgot
that.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And I don't know why, but I had saved that card. I love the card.
Well, you gave me a copy of your book because you had written a memoir already.
Right.
And I asked you, could I write down the name of the book? And you said, I have one in my backpack. And here, you have it. And I said, but that's your only one. And you said, I don't care. Take it. And I was like, wow, this woman is amazing.
Well, I already knew what the book was. So I was just thinking about everything that everyone was saying, and I'm going to mispronounce names, so I think I'm just going to say the ideas. And for me, it's everything that everyone is saying is sort of art as resistance, which actually has quite a long history. And this is just is following in those very important footsteps. And I think there was someone was talking a little bit about language and dehumanizing language. And I think that like you during the first election of the Trump administration, there was a lot of dehumanizing language around unaccompanied refugee minors and children, and a lot of visuals that were sort of supporting this deficit narrative and saying things like aliens and invasions and waves and caravans, and you're thinking, but these are children and these are people and they have stories, and that if you can, I really believe, as I think everyone here, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think that some of the people who have been talking, that if you can take these abstract sort of negative ideas and say, but here's a person and here's the name of that person, it's Vilma, and Vilma is from Guatemala and Vilma loves books, and she and that's part of why she is trying to walk to America on her own. And that it becomes much harder to say that's an alien or that's an invader. And I think words are really important and images are really important. And if you need something to kind of counterbalance the narrative that is getting played out, and every time we do that is an act of resistance, and it is art as resistance, and it's putting out images and changing the way that people can frame things and see things, and that if you can share those stories, even if they're not yours, but if you share them, if you share them carefully and with sensitivity, it's almost more important that those stories are out there. At some point, it probably tilts, and like we heard, you want Palestinians to have the Palestinian story, but you also need all the stories, because it's a gateway for people to understand. And if that gateway is, I'm going to take an American author who's writing a story because that's interesting, but now I understand, and now I actually want to get the Palestinian point of view or the other view. I think anything that gets those ideas out there that are disruptive of what is currently being said is really important, and is why the books that Street Noise publishes, and I was saying to Makee, I try and read all of them, and they all have strong points of view, and they're all books, as you say, for people who give a damn, and they really give you different points of view through their art through the language, and which is the beauty of comics, is how you can combine those things to get those ideas out there in ways that allow people to take them in, because a lot of times it's really, really complex. But if you can boil it down into a panel with words and images, you're already simplifying it so that people can digest it. And if they can digest that, then maybe they'll say, now I need to know more, and keep going. Yeah.
I love that. Thank you. And now I'd like to hear from Makee. Makee wrote this amazing book called Call Me Emma, and the subtitle is One Chinese Girl Finds Her Way in America. And it's a memoir of her coming to New York City. And it has wonderful images of Queens, where she grew up. Yeah, so I'd love to hear your perspective as someone who did immigrate here as a child, and how you feel about your art and your book and what it's saying to the world.
Let me test this mic first. I mean, first of all, just very happy to be here and to see you again. Yeah, and it's definitely an honor to be published by Street Noise and to witness your 5 years anniversary. And I just finished reading Tracy's book as well, so I learned so much, and definitely recommend for everyone to read it. For my own book, is a very personal story of how me and my family came to New York when I was 16, so a teenager, when everything felt very overwhelming and I didn't speak English at all. So it's very personal, but to me, personal is political, because I mean, this is nonfiction work, but even if I do fictional work, I do want my characters and stories to have so many rich details in life that feels very, very honest, because honesty is always my priority. And sometimes it definitely upsets people, and sometimes it's like it's a far audience you might not know of, but I think the toughest audience is always, someone close to you, your parents, your family. So I'm trying to be honest about my experience and how I feel about my own family and how each member struggles, in the immigrating to America. And eventually my dad went back to China. Me, my mom, and my sister, we all stay in New York. So we've been here for 13 years. So it's been a long time, and it's played an important role in my identity as well. If I never came here, I don't know who I am or where I will be. So I definitely think dissident to me is to take risks and to be brave, to be always honest, even though it might upset people, even though you never know, what the audience will react to what you think. But that's something I observed in real life, and I want to be honest in my book. And after 5 years, 10 years, politics change, circumstances change, but if you are honest to yourself and looking back, you still be hold accountable for what you said, and you'll be proud, of saying the truth, because that was what I believed. So I think that's what it means to me. Yeah.
Thank you. It sort of strikes me that it's a weird world that we live in when honesty is so disruptive, So I think what we would love to do is open this up to questions from all of you. I think if you want to ask any of us anything, we would love to have a discussion.
We have a microphone.
And we have a microphone.
Raise your hand.
And they're fun to use because you can put on your NPR voice. Don't be shy.
Thank you to everyone on the panel. This is wonderful, and I appreciate you bringing people in from outside to talk to you that you've worked with. Liz, I'm so impressed with this company, this publishing house that you've opened. I'm a former, I should say, I'm a recovering Wall Street analyst. I left Wall Street in 2006 when I realized that you can't grow to infinity on a finite planet, and there's a lot more to that story. For years, I've had people wanting me to write a book about why I left. It's not just that; it's a very predatory environment, needless to say. Um, I were you familiar, like when you started this company, you explained when you started it and kind of how things have gotten progressively worse since Trump took office. Um, Revolution Books, are you familiar as an activist? Were you familiar with that um, entity? I ran across that when I left Wall Street and I became an activist. I think that is a good outlet too for.
Is it a bookstore?
It was a book, yeah, and I think it's still around. I just came back to New York a few years ago, and I've been dealing with family with health issues. But to get more, greater distribution, I think this is a great time to have a publishing house like this because I think you're going to draw a huge amount of interest. I think significant amount of the country is extremely upset with what's going on.
Well,
So
one thing that I've found that I get real support from is the fact that people in bookstores, bookshop owners, and librarians across the country, even in the reddest of states, the bookshop owners and the librarians are really pushing hard for freedom of expression and freedom to read. And they're fighting the book bans. And that surprised me a little bit when I've met people at the ABA and the ALA meetings and comic book shop owners too. I think it just really reaffirms my sense that freedom of speech is really, really key, and that we all are on the front lines of that fight. So yeah, I mean, I'm not sure about Revolution Books, but I'd love to, they should have all of our books on their bookshelf.
yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you all for sharing. I find it incredibly inspiring and brave of you to take the risk of telling your stories and being honest.
Oh, wait. Can we introduce Morgan Bosher? Morgan's book is coming out from Street Noise Books in February. It's already been printed and it looks amazing. It's called Chicken Heart. And it's a really fabulous book. So welcome, Morgan. You're
That's
part of the
very
family.
kind. Thank you. I'm in very good company. And honestly, I am a bit nervous being on this precipice of having my voice out there, my story out there as a trans person. And I feel sort of like I'm taking a leap because I don't know what kind of response or backlash will happen. And I wonder if each of you could share, if you feel like going there, like what has the worst backlash been since putting out your work? And did it match your fears? Did it not? How did you respond to it?
Well, I don't want, I mean, I don't have to go first, but. Cool. Honestly, Morgan, I didn't think that wasn't the first thing I thought of when I also made the leap. Just because I don't know, I think I was developing my sass and my arrogance as a sort of armor. But the worst, honestly, I expected more. In retrospect, the worst feedback I got was from not Spellbound, but when I first published a cartoon in the New Yorker online, which was it was called something like misgendering, an analogy, and someone wrote to me and they're like, this is a very specious, like this analogy doesn't work because your name is not the same as your gender. And I was like, whatever, I'm not here for the pedantic. And then somebody wrote a sort of slightly critical review of my books in the Georgia Review. But, academic journal, I don't care. But honestly, it's not that I didn't get a huge backlog. So I'm not, I just to reassure you to some degree that it's not all going to be like, daggers thrown at you because your voice is out there. I think the you're going to get way more positive reinforcement from people who need to hear stories like yours and mine. I got way more than like 99% of the correspondence I got was really moving and touching, from South Asian queers and trans people and people who are like, hey, that looks like me, and those were, getting those emails made it all worthwhile. Thank you.
I remember when you came and talked to my class, and there was a young person from India who said, "I've never seen someone like me speaking about comics," and she was so happy to see you. And I don't know if she said that to you, or maybe she said it to me after class, but it was so impactful for her. She's like, "I've never seen me up there."
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Job done.
Yeah. So, so this book is not my story, but I can tell you a little story that maybe talks a little bit about what you're saying, which is when I wanted to do this book, and it really was not even that I wanted to, it was that I had to, because I could not stand how these children were being treated. Like it wasn't a choice. I think anyone who's an activist here or who is passionate about something, it's like this thing keeps you up. You just have to do this. It's not a choice. You just do it. And so I was doing that, and I was my agent was sending out the chapter of the book to people, and there was another publisher who was interested, and they eventually said, we don't think we can do this because we're afraid that you won't get the story right, because it's not your story, which was actually my biggest fear, was, can I actually do this right when it isn't my story? And I was like, I was crushed, and I said, oh my gosh, they're right. This isn't, I shouldn't be doing this. I'm going to just give this up. And then I kind of rethought that, and I said, you know what? It galvanizes me. And instead of shriveling up, I said, I can do this, and I'm actually going to dig deeper. And it made it so that I forged partnerships with people in Guatemala, in Honduras, in El Salvador, in Guinea. Made the book take, I think I thought originally it was going to take 6 months, and it took like 5 years. But it was so important because I wanted to make sure that I could get these stories right, that I could check my implicit biases, that I could make these partnerships with people, and they could look at the drawings and say, I see myself in it, I don't see myself in it. They could give me the feedback, and it was so important. So it was a moment where someone said something before the book was published that could have made it so I didn't even try. But I instead took that and said, I meet that challenge, and it made the book so much better.
Thank you.
I think that's an important point, actually, from my perspective as a publisher as well, because I haven't experienced any really negative attacks on me for publishing the books that I publish. But I do sometimes get questions because I'm publishing a lot of, it's part of the Street Noise mission is to publish marginalized voices, and yet I don't really fit in personally. My identity is not marginalized. So I'm an ally. I'm a straight, white, cis female. And, but I think the important, what you were just saying, Tracy, is that those of us who are as our allies, it doesn't mean we should sit there and do nothing. Our job is to use our privilege to lift up the voices of other people and to shine a light on those stories. I think for me, that's been an important thing that I've been grappling with and sort of recognizing And I really admired. I admit when Tracy's agent came to me with her book idea, that was my first concern. Was like, wait a minute, but those aren't your stories. But then she convinced me because of who she is and how thorough she is and how thoughtful, and that she was going to make sure that these stories were told properly, and that it was using the voices of the people in those situations. And if she didn't, I mean, to the point of Mohammed, who said the Palestinian people, we need Palestinian people telling their own stories. Yes, but we also need Joe Sacco, who goes into Palestine and tells amazing stories. And I know Mohammed loves Joe Sacco, so he would not think that that was not a good thing. So there's roles for us all to play in fighting back against this oppression.
Well, I also think it's important that you're not walking in someone else's shoes, you're walking next to them if it's not your own story. And I think that that's something to always keep in mind. And also for Unaccompanied, the profits from that book go back to the organizations that I made the partnerships with. So I think that's another way that you can be supporting and be an ally.
I just want to add something. I think it's interesting because I'm not sure if you're also a first-time author or is your debut book second? Okay. But I think for me it's like my debut book, so of course I was nervous checking up the reviews online, right? There's a moment your heart beats up and you're like fingers trembling, opening up the page of Goodreads, and then you realize some people might, they're like, oh, I love the storyline, and exact same thing, somebody else might say, oh, I find them kind of like broken, the storyline. So at the end of the day, I think once the book passed my standard and my expectation, and I believe it's a really good book, to me that's like done for the story. But in the end, 1,000 readers have 1,000 Hamlets, and something somebody like is exactly, someone else hates. So it's really funny, that kind of, but I do relate, that moment that your heart speeds up. Right, but, you can always turn them off.
I have heard that you're not supposed to look at Goodreads reviews. That's
Really?
what.
They're tough?
Yeah. I mean, I guess because there's just so many of them, I don't know, that people feel free to be nasty, or I don't know. But it's up to you.
Very helpful and reassuring. Thank you all.
Time for like 2 more questions. We're going to go here, go to the front row.
Thank you so much. My name is Reem. I'm Palestinian, and I missed Muhammad, even though I came especially to hear him. But I find this discussion very interesting. So we have Muhammad al-Kurd, who is also Palestinian and wrote a book called The Perfect Victim, where, it seems like many times when we want to tell our individual stories so that we can make the public more able to humanize us when we are, under attack and dehumanized in almost every press and in every communication, at least in the West, that there's this selection for the perfect victim, as if we need to be the perfect victim in order to fit into these individual stories. And I would love to hear, how do you think about that perspective? Because in a way it is maintaining the power to the white middle class and, civilized, between quotes, so that we can look civilized enough. And I think there's probably no answer, but how much do you think about that? Then my second question, as somebody, I'm in healthcare, but I feel that sometimes falling into the personal stories are more important for the people themselves. As a Palestinian, I would love to read more about the Palestinians who made it in spite of the oppression. But then many times these stories become, like an authentic story to tell. Like, even in therapy, like my therapist will be idealizing me, like, oh, you're the one that did this. You did this at the beginning, now you're doing this, which is not helpful, at least to make the policy changes. So I would love to hear your thoughts about these 2 points.
Okay, I had a thought about the first one. Well, I guess my thought was that that was part of the reason that I started Street Noise. That was part of the reason that I left mainstream publishing. I had worked for the big publishers in New York before I went and decided to do this on my own. And one of the reasons was because at that time, there was a big push in mainstream publishing to have diverse voices, which was great. But from my perspective, what I saw was that they wanted diverse voices that fit into a mold of maybe like the perfect victim type mold. And I found that people's stories are messy and they don't always have happy endings. They don't always give you this feeling of redemption at the end or whatever. I know that one of our books, and I have a selection of every single Street Noise book here. And at the end, you're each going to be able to choose one or two. But one of the books that is up there is called Nervosa by Haley Gold. And it won the Graphic Medicine Award a couple of years ago. But that book was apparently, I heard from her agent that a lot of publishers had turned it down because it's a very dark book. I mean, I don't like using colors though for things. Anyway, it's a hard book to read. Haley's got a very sort of brittle personality. She's very witty and smart, but also very sarcastic and can be very nasty. And it comes through in the book. And she didn't get better in the end. I'm still friends with her, and she's still very much ill with anorexia. So there isn't this sort of like, and see, you'll get better and you'll live happily ever after. But I decided that we need to hear the voices of people who don't all turn out fine in the end. And I think that even applied a little bit when I was talking to Bishakh about her book, because she said to me, I really wanted to work with her, and she said, well, I have this series of diary comics, but I don't know if they're really a book. And I read them and I thought they were great. And so we figured out a way to make them into a book, and we sewed them all together, and that's what Spellbound is. And she did a whole new section, 2 new sections, filling out different things. And it became this amazing thing. But I think most publishers would look at it and say, no, it's not a book, like go somewhere else or something. And I felt that a lot of the stories that, I mean, even Power Born of Dreams, Mohammed's book, I worked really, really, really closely with him on that. And we sort of worked out the stories together, with him sort of telling me what it was verbally, and then us figuring it out. And these are the kind of things that that I've done with a lot of the authors, because I think that's a really important thing. I think that mainstream publishers, the big 5, what we're seeing is as they cave on a lot of, and not just publishers, but as everybody caves on the DEI thing, like we're going to end up with just like totally homogenous stuff. And, sure, maybe you might have a little brown face in there, but they don't have any personality. They're not who they are. So, so that's my response, and I forget what the second question was. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like I only have this perspective as a little indie publisher based in my house in Brooklyn.
Say something on that topic just briefly. I'll speak just for myself. I'm not interested in my own work in telling stories of victimhood, and I think that's true. I'll just go out on a limb and say a lot of trans authors are not interested in that either, and we're rather more interested in sort of celebrating our how we thrive and how we kick ass and how we're just like amazing in spite of the war on our bodies, right? So yeah, I'm not, I don't think a lot of us are writing stuff looking for, and it's a different issue altogether from Palestine. I'll just make that clear. But I think a lot of us are writing stories not to elicit pity, right? Not to say we're just as human as you are. Look, cry tears. We bleed red blood too, and it's I'm like, no, I'm not. I dissent. I'm not part of this system anymore, and fuck all y'all. But also, yeah, I think just telling very complex stories is a way of making a statement about your wholeness as a human being, and I think that in and of itself is a political act.
Hi. This is a question that kind of evolved, and it's inspired a bit by yours, Morgan. I was thinking, who gets pushback? And I was thinking about banned book lists. And, Maya Kababi is the apex of the banned book list. But when you get on the banned book list, you sell so many books. And I was just wondering, have any of your titles ended up on banned book lists, and what has no?
Nope. My husband always says, can't you get that book on the banned book list?
Maybe I could talk to somebody.
Yeah, can we do that? No, and I remember thinking when Queer as All Get Out came out by Shelby Criswell, which is also on the shelf somewhere because I have all of our books here. Shelby is a non-binary cartoonist living in San Antonio, Texas. And at the time the book came out, there was a lot of book banning happening in Texas. And I was like, come on, this is a queer book and it's Texas, come on. But then I realized it's better that it's not banned because, sure, I'd like to sell 10 times as many books, but it's still on the shelves. And people in little libraries and little bookstores in Texas can buy it and they can see themselves in it. So that's how I justify being okay with not being banned.
And this is the book.
There it is. Queer as All Get Out.
So that is all the time we have for this evening. Thank you all so much. This was excellent.
Thank you all so much. And I have still on. There we go. I have a copy of lots of books here. And we also have multiple copies of I'm a Wild Seed by Sharon Lee de la Cruz, because Sharon did an event here at the library a few months ago. And so they have extras. So you can each have a copy of Sharon's book and then take one of the other ones. And we have some bookmarks, and I made buttons in my dining room today. So there's some buttons. So you can each have a Street Noise button. Stickers for some of the books. We have all of the books that we've published. I wanted to have them all on one big table because it's really impressive, but they didn't fit. So there's 35. We've published 35 books. Yay! Thank you all so much.